What I love about how the United Methodist Church has woven this into our book of discipline is that it's intended to be just something that's a practice that we do in the same way that we have Sabbath once a week and in the same way that we take yearly vacations every year. It is intended every 6 years to be a dedicated time where we step away from ministry and rest our hearts, souls, and spirits and bodies.
Renewal Leave offers clergy a dedicated time away from the daily demands of pastoral leadership, creating space for God to bring renewal. Reverend April Blaine believes every eligible clergy member should take advantage of this opportunity. She shares how stepping away has made her a better pastor, partner, mother, and friend. April, my first question for you is, what is renewal leave?
The short answer is that it's exactly what it sounds like. It's time to take away and step away from ministry to renew your heart, soul, spirit, body, and to reconnect with yourself and with God and with others and with the world. And I think a common misconception that I hear when people ask me about renewal leave is whether it's something that you should only do sort of as I'm burnt out, this is a last resort kind of thing. What I love about how the United Methodist Church has woven this into our book of discipline is that it's intended to be just something that's a practice that we do in the same way that we have Sabbath once a week and in the same way that we take yearly vacations every year. It is intended every 6 years to be a dedicated time where we step away from ministry and rest our hearts, souls, and spirits and bodies and renew ourselves so that we can return back into ministry and be refreshed and ready to take on the challenges that we're all facing on a daily basis.
It's very important, I think, for people, especially maybe laity who are not familiar with this practice, to understand that this isn't vacation.
It's not vacation.
And it's not even study leave necessarily.
No, that is sabbatical. And we have a designation for that as well that can be requested. But renewal leave is just spiritual, bodily, emotional renewal from stepping away from the duties of ministry for a season so that you can step back refreshed and ready to go. It doesn't have an agenda. You don't have to have a big overlaying plan of all the things you're going to learn and come back and teach your congregation. It really is renewal time. So, and the United Methodist Book of Discipline allows for us to take every 6 years up to 6 months of time away. And you negotiate that with your congregation around how that will work, how coverage will happen, and obviously with your district superintendent. But the intention is that it should be paid at some level, and you can negotiate what that looks like. But the expectation is it's not just you step away and then you have no income for that time. So obviously there are negotiations that have to happen and certainly budgets and those sorts of things. But yeah, it's a time to step away and refresh and come back. There are amazing things that happen in congregations when somebody is able to leave and able to come back. I think it also assures the congregation and helps them understand why this process is in place when they've gone through an actual renewal leave with one of their clergy and they return and they see the benefit of it and they see their renewed energy. They also see that, oh, wow, there's a lot of things we were able to do when the pastor wasn't here that maybe we didn't know we were able to do. So it really is intended to definitely benefit the pastor and to refresh them for ministry, but absolutely also to benefit the congregation in the ways that it empowers them and also helps them to maybe even give themselves some permission to take that same kind of rest in the world, which I have seen be a huge benefit for laity as well.
So you have taken a renewal leave.
I have. I've taken 2.
And how many years have you been in the United Methodist Church as a pastor?
I've been officially in licensed ministry since 2008. So that's about 17 years.
So tell us a little bit about how renewal leave helped you.
Oh, how can I count the ways? Let's see. My first renewal leave happened in 2016. It was not intended to be a renewal leave that I came back and got reappointed to a new place, but it ended up being that. So I was very grateful to have 2 months from the time that I left my one church and prepared to go to the next church. So for that indication, I had planned it as not being that. I had planned it to be a 2-month time of rest and renewal. And about 3 weeks before the leave started is when I found out I was getting reappointed.
So then you mentioned that you had just had a second renewal leave recently. So tell us a little bit about that one.
Oh, well, having had this first experience, I knew a couple things. I learned a couple things. 2 months was not long enough. Definitely not long enough. And especially with a move in between it, we had to physically move houses and those kinds of things. So that was all part of it. But I definitely learned I needed longer. And so I scheduled this one for 4 months, and we started planning a year and a half before it happened, which was really helpful and really got everybody ready mentally. We shared duties. We had a real nice timeline of who was preaching when and did a lot of things to get it set up, which really helped. But I knew I was coming back to the same place. That was not up for a possibility. And I also made sure with district superintendents and other things to make sure we were not going to do a repeat of what had happened before. So I really got to unplug, and I really got to feel like what it feels to not be responsible for anybody. And even though I got a feel of that in the last one, the one before, I knew I was gearing up for something. And so there was a little bit of, it didn't quite feel as if I was completely detached and that everything was covered.
You were coming back to relationships that were already built and to a congregation who
Absolutely.
already knew and loved you.
Right. I didn't need to be preparing for that part. So that really gave a freedom. And I'll be honest, it took me 6 weeks though, before I was really actually able to wake up in the morning and feel what it felt like to not have that responsibility. I mean, I would have nightmares at night that I'd forgotten. So, all the things that were like, I'd have the church dreams, right? I didn't have my sermon written. I didn't have all these things. I mean, it was really a full 6 weeks before some of that had just stopped and the voices in my head had quieted enough to just be. And so I'm glad that I took 4 months, because then after 6 weeks, I had still 2.5 months to really just be April with not Pastor April, not all of these other responsibilities in the community, just got to do that. And I appreciate some of the planning that went into it and the people that asked me good questions about where do you want to be in these moments? Because I live, like many pastors, I live in the community that I serve, and my kids go to school there, and we're all in many of the same places that my congregation members are, at the grocery store, at this. And so it was really smart for the first 2 months of it that I spent a good amount of time not in Ohio. I actually went other places so that I was actually having a break from seeing people and bumping into people. And that helped a lot. And so, yeah, those last 2 months, and then the last 2 weeks, I was starting to think about coming back. But in the middle there, I had a full 2 months of just being me and resting and reconnecting with friends and people and really listening. I think the big thing that came out of my renewal leave was listening to what was on my heart and what God was calling me to in this season that I thought I had been hearing, but I hadn't really been giving myself enough space to answer that question.
How did your renewal leave change your staff or volunteers?
Oh my gosh. In the best kind of way. I can humbly laugh at the staff meeting we had the first staff meeting we had when I was back from leave. And I was asking the group, talk to me about how dynamics changed, things you learned, things that you are, insights that you had while I was away, about how our team works together. And one of them, who is usually not so afraid to share her opinion, which I love about her, she said, I got to be honest, it was kind of nice having you gone. She said, we all got to have a break in a sense. She said, you are the kind of leader that is always pushing us to see what the next thing is and to examine ourselves fully and to see where we can grow. And she said, I love that about you. But for 4 months, it was kind of nice to sort of have the gas pedal eased up on. And we all got to just be for a little bit also. And she said, and now we're ready to work again. It's good. but it was helpful to hear that. They got to breathe for a minute and reflect on what needs to get done. And I can also take care of myself. I don't have to move at the same pace, which we laugh about that now. That was lovely. But at the same time, Also, we launched a worship service while I was on leave. We launched a third worship service while I was gone. We were very prepared. We had hired all the staff before I left, but they did that without me. And I think there was a beautiful thing that happened of them just taking ownership and recognizing that they don't need me to approve.
You mentioned a good point, which is you had staff. Mm-hmm. So many of our clergy do not have
That's right.
a number of staff. So they would still be eligible for this leave.
Absolutely.
So how would they plan for something if they're sort of the one-hit wonder of everything? You know?
Well, you would work with your team. You'd work with your lay leaders, which I will say, I didn't just work with my staff on this. I was working with my lay leaders. Our church council was a huge part in shaping what this looked like. But you also can ask them really great questions, as in, I'm going to go and have some time to rest my spirits. What do you guys want this to be about for you? And one of the things that I've seen some churches do, they'll have sort of a series of guest speakers who'll come on different topics. We have such a plethora of amazing speakers within our annual conference that your DS and others can help you connect to, of retired clergy, certified lay speakers who love to have the opportunity to come and share some of what they have. And it would be so cool to have, and you probably have people in your congregation who could come and speak or share testimony. And so it's also a creative time to think about who could be at this pulpit other than ordained clergy every single week. And how do I give my laity some voice and excitement around, what do you want to learn while I'm away? This can be a fun and exciting time for them too.
And so ordained clergy are eligible for this benefit, including deacons.
And my understanding, you can correct me if this is wrong, we can do a little research on this. This is also true for licensed local pastors and others who are serving. It's serving for 6 years in a full-time capacity. So we're preparing this year. My associate pastor at our church is a licensed local pastor. He has been serving for 20 years. He from my encouragement, took a 1-month quick leave before he arrived in 2019, but it's been 6 years since then. And he's going to take a 3-month leave this summer. And I believe he's entitled to that according to the discipline. And the way I read it, so we're doing it. We're doing it this summer for him. And so, yeah, I think that is a right that every clergy should look into. And if you're part-time, I think it doesn't exclude you. It just makes the timeline a little different in terms of how you count those years, but you certainly would be eligible as well. You just have to be the equivalent of 6 full-time years is, I think, what the discipline intends.
And so if people wanted to learn more about the details relating to renewal leave, where can they find those?
Your website has a number of excellent resources that can guide them. In fact, a few years back when Bishop Palmer was still here, we put together a resource of renewal leave resources to get you started. The first step is to, number one, talk to your staff parish. That's the first go-to, is just explore it with them, because you really do need them to be supportive and understand why this is important. And right alongside that, you want to also talk to your district superintendent as early in the process. Those are the two first steps to make sure that you guys can think about a timeline. And my advice is, you don't plan this in a month. I mean, you don't do this, there is a leave of absence that sometimes people take, which is a different kind of leave that, maybe something tragic has happened in your community or your life, and you need to step away. That's what conference relations for, and leave of absence. Renewal leave is really something different. And I would not conflate them, because if you need leave of absence because you've had something tragic happen and some life has, brought you to that place, you should see conference relations and your DS about that. But if this is just about renewal, give yourself some time to plan for it and then get it on the calendar and move forward.
So let's just recap one more time to make sure that I'm grasping all of this too. So there's information on the West Ohio Conference website, westohioumc.org. Information's also available in the journal of our annual conference under our rules and policies. Absolutely. And there's also paragraphs in the United Methodist Book of Discipline that have information related to renewal leave.
Yes.
Is there anything else you'd like to tell us about that we haven't already covered?
I guess this is the last thing I want to say, is I think the thing that I hear clergy say to me when they're being really honest about renewal leave is they feel like it's selfish.
Mm.
They feel like it's selfish to take this time for themselves. And I think what I need you to hear me say is that when you are listening to what God has on your heart, it will never be just for you. It will always be for you and for the world. And I look at the things that came out of my leave and the ways that has blessed my church, the ways that it has blessed beyond my church, the ways that it has given all of us a little more space and vision to imagine what's possible. It wasn't just about me. So when I allowed for that space to happen, it allowed Spirit to do much bigger things. And so it's not selfish. It's faithful in my mind.
So just to recap, as a person who just is hearing this for the first time, in my opinion, here's what I'm hearing from you. Mm-hmm. Number one, it's a beautiful time of rest where a clergy person comes back with a sense of renewed call.
Absolutely.
Clarity of call.
Yes.
And renewed energy to live out that call.
Absolutely.
The other piece I'm hearing is you have permission to take renewal leave because you are called to set apart ministry.
That's right. And in fact, building this rhythm into your life as a clergy is just part of ministry. And how do we shift our mindsets to think not of this as, icing on the cake or some extra thing that we might do? This is actually a part of our work, in the same way that when you referenced the vacation policy where the renewal leave is housed for our West Ohio conference. In that document, it also talks about Sabbath is a part of our work week.
Yes.
It is a part of our work. And I would love to see renewal leave understood as a natural part of our ministry so that we continue to make sure that we are not the center of all things. Things can continue on without us, and not just continue, but thrive without us. And we are allowed to step away and hear what God is doing. If more clergy were practicing renewal leave every 6 years, my guess is we would have healthier clergy, we would have fewer burnouts, and fewer of the dysfunctional moments that we sometimes find ourselves in, because we'd be proactive about giving ourselves the rest we need.
April, thank you so much for sharing your own experience and then also encouraging your colleagues.
Thank you.